June 1983, a man was out walking with his friend's sons in Yosemite National Park and found a hand in a meadow. Tom Day, who stumbled upon the crime scene, said, quote, "It was pretty obvious it was a human hand. I knew I had to get a hold of law enforcement and get someone up here to look at it." End quote. Kim Tucker, a former criminal investigator at the National Park Service, said, quote, "We had no idea of whom, what, when, where, why, or how this hand had come to Summit Meadow." End quote. The officers on the case faced obstacles from the beginning. The crime scene was in the complete wilderness, where no widespread DNA testing at the time, and there were no clues in the surrounding area. Tucker said, quote, "We didn't have any known missing people from the immediate area, so it was very difficult to think, well, what is the next thing we should do?" End quote. Investigators would eventually turn it to a forensic anthropologist who suggested that the deceased was a young woman. In the spring of 1984, when the case had gone cold, investigators were contacted by the California Department of Justice, who gave them a tip that an alleged serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, was confessing to murders across the country, including one that could fit the profile of the Yosemite case. The alleged serial killer confessed to things like necrophilia and cutting up victims into, quote, "little tiny pieces," end quote. And during 4 months in police custody, he admitted to committing 156 murders, mostly of female victims. One place that he said he had committed a homicide was, quote, "a mountainous national park in California," end quote, which gave investigators a potential lead for the first time in the case. The alleged serial killer also said in an interview with the police that he had, quote, "specifically across the United States left evidence to show I was doing these crimes," end quote. Investigators went to meet the alleged killer in the Sacramento County Jail in August 1984. He gave them his testimony, confessing to killing a young woman in the national park by strangulation. A few months later in Texas, the alleged killer provided even more details, saying he and the alleged victim had lunch together, eating, quote, "some fried chicken wrapped in tinfoil," end quote, and beer before killing her. He said that he remembered trail markings near where the murder occurred. The investigators realized that these markings could have been the cross-country ski trail signs nailed to the trees in Summit Meadow. Don Kilo, a former criminal investigator for the national park, said, quote, "It's like this guy has been to the crime scene. That's when it hit us," end quote. Back in Yosemite, the investigators made crucial breakthroughs with leads from the alleged killer's confession. They found beer cans wrapped in tinfoil, a canteen, and what seemed like a piece of fabric that could have been from the victim's jacket. Tucker said, quote, "I don't know what we found was proof, but I feel like we had found the scene that he described," end quote. Let me introduce you to another suspect, Carrie Stainer. Carrie was born on August 13, 1961, the first of 5 children born to Delbert Fox and Kay Steiner in Merced, California. He had 3 sisters and a younger brother, Steffi Gregory Stainer. On December 4, 1972, 7-year-old Stefan was abducted by child molester Kenneth Parnell. He was held by his abductor 38 miles away from Mariposa County and later in Mendocino County until he was age 14, when he managed to escape with another of Parnell's victims, Timothy White. Stainer had later stated that he felt neglected while his parents grieved over the loss of Stephen. When he escaped and returned home, he received massive media attention, which resulted in the 1989 release of the television miniseries based on his experience, I Know My First Name Is Stephen, which was based on the true crime book of the same name. Carrie once again felt overshadowed by the attention his brother got. Stephen later got married and had 2 children and died in a motorcycle accident in 1989. Although investigators have suggested that the kidnapping of his brother may have contributed to his later psychological problems, Steiner told authorities after his arrest that he had begun experiencing fantasies about abducting and killing women at the age of 7, before his brother's abduction occurred. During his childhood, another troubling incident was reported when a friend of his sister was visiting the family home. According to accounts, Steiner exposed himself to the girl, an act that would later be reviewed as early indication of inappropriate and concerning behavior. At the age of 3, Steiner was diagnosed with trichotillomania, a disorder characterized by compulsive hair pulling, and was prescribed medication to help manage the condition. Despite treatment, the disorder persisted throughout his childhood and into his high school years. The resulting bald patches made him a target of severe bullying, and often wore a baseball cap to conceal his hair loss. Despite these challenges, Steiner was regarded as highly intelligent by both teachers and classmates. He was placed in accelerated academic courses and demonstrated a strong creative talent, particularly in art and tuning. His contributions in the school newspaper earned him recognition as the, quote, most creative, unquote, student in his graduating class at Merced High School, where he received the honor at 18. After graduating, he worked as a window installer at a glass company, where he developed a fantasy about ramming a truck into the workplace, killing everyone there, and setting the business on fire. In 91, he tried killing himself with carbon monoxide. In 95, he was admitted into the psychiatric hospital after claiming to have had a nervous breakdown and was released after receiving treatment. In 97, he was arrested for possession of marijuana and methamphetamines. Those charges were eventually dropped. Also in 97, he was hired as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge Motel in El Portal, California, just outside the Highway 140 entrance to Yosemite National Park. He would find all of his confirmed victims at the Cedar Lodge Motel. Between February and July 1999, he murdered at least 2 women and 2 teenagers. On March 18, 1999, 42-year-old Carol Yvonne Stund and 16-year-old Argentine exchange student Salvina Palazzo was found in the trunk of the charred remains of Stund's Pontiac rental car. The bodies were burned beyond recognition, were identified using dental records. Stund had been strangled with a rope and shot, but was not raped, while Palazzo had been raped and shot. A week later, the police received an anonymous note with a hand-drawn map indicating the location of the third victim, Stund's 15-year-old daughter, Juliana. The top of the note said, quote, "We had fun with this one," end quote. Investigators went to the location depicted on the map and found the remains of Julia, who had been raped and her throat had been cut. Detectives began to interview employees of the motel where the 3 victims had been staying just before their deaths on February 15th. One of those employees was Steiner, but he was not considered a suspect at that point because he had no criminal history and remained calm during the police interview. Several months later, on July 22nd, the body of 26-year-old Yosemite Institute naturalist Joey Ruth Armstrong was discovered. Witnesses reported seeing a blue 1972 International Scout parked outside the cabin where Armstrong had been staying the day before, on July 21st. Investigators traced the vehicle to Carrie Steiner quickly, making him a prime suspect in the case. FBI agents John Bowles and Jeff Rennick located Steiner at the Laguna del Sol nudist resort in Wilton, California, where he was arrested and transported to Sacramento for questioning. During the interrogation, Steiner made a shocking confession. He admitted not only to Armstrong's murder, but also to the killings of Carol Stund, Julie Stund, and Salvina Palazzo, whose disappearances and murders had been remained unsolved for several months. Evidence recovered from Steiner's vehicle further linked him to Armstrong's killing, strengthening the case against him and bringing an end to one of California's most notorious investigations of the late 1990s. Steiner was tried in federal court for Armstrong's murder, since it occurred on federal land. To avoid a possible death sentence, he pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder, felony first-degree murder, kidnapping resulting in death, and attempted aggravated sexual abuse resulting in death. During the sentencing hearing, Steiner stunned the courtroom when he suddenly broke down in tears and apologized. Quote, "I wish I could tell you why I did such a thing, but I don't even know myself. I am so sorry. I wish there was a reason, but there isn't. It's senseless," end quote. Armstrong's mother started crying as she listened to Steiner and said afterwards that she believed his apology was genuine. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. For the other murders, he was tried in state court. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Patricia Marie Hicks Dahlstorm, 28, was last known to have contacted with her family in September 1982. After relocating from Washington State to Merced, California, Hicks had previously been a member of San Anda Apostolic Church, a religious group founded by Donald Gibson. The organization later became under scrutiny after allegations of sexual abuse carried out under the guise of religious practices. In 1981, Gibson was convicted of multiple sex-related offenses, and Hicks subsequently left the group. He joined the following it was believed to have been motivated by the trauma she suffered surrounding the suicide of her brother. She had also a short-lived marriage to a former high school friend, divorcing in 1974. Other close friends stated that her personality had changed significantly after those events and described her as vulnerable and likely to misplace trust. According to her roommate, Hicks was last seen boarding public transportation bound for Yosemite National Park. Her disappearance remained unsolved for decades. In June 1983, a severed arm and hand were discovered within the park, and a skull was found nearby in 1988. However, the remains were not identified until April 2021, when advances in genetic genealogy confirmed they belonged to Hicks. The group had frequently been described as a cult, and many residents on Merced reportedly held negative views of Donald Gibson and his followers. Former members and investigators alleged that the recruitment had often targeted young and attractive individuals, with some male recruits reportedly being drawn in by promises of drugs, sex, and a sense of belonging. Additional accounts describe practices that allegedly included arranged marriages and ritualized sexual activities within the organization. Over the years, many former members and associates declined to speak with law enforcement officials or documentary filmmakers, making efforts to fully understand the group's activities more challenging. When the case was featured in the documentary series Wild Crime, Hicks' surviving family members chose not to participate. As a result, her identity was withheld from the public until the season was released in October 2022. In December 1980, several members of the religious group, including Patricia Hicks, were arrested as part of a broader investigation into the organization. The inquiry began after 3 underage boys reported that Donald Gibson had provided them with LSD and alleged that at least one of them had been sexually assaulted while unconscious shortly after meeting him. Investigators also uncovered allegations that additional sexual abuse had been carried out under the guise of religious practices. Gibson was brought to trial in September 1981 and was convicted of 4 sex-related offenses the following month. Despite his conviction, investigators believe that many followers remain loyal to him through a combination of fear, manipulation, and psychological influence. The prosecuting attorney in the case described Gibson as someone capable of violence against those he perceived as betraying him. Before he could be sentenced, Gibson fled after posting bail and disappeared. He has never been located. Over the years, some investigators have expressed concern that he may have been contacted to Patricia Hicks' death, either directly or through individuals acting on his behalf, although no evidence has conclusively established such involvement. Following Gibson's disappearance, Hicks decided to leave the group and move away from the area. According to a longtime roommate, who was also a member of the organization, the decision was upsetting because the two women had become close during the years they lived together. The roommate later recalled that Hicks intended to travel by public transportation to Yosemite National Park. However, the exact destination she planned to visit within the park was never determined. Years later, Hicks' remains would be discovered in Yosemite, but the circumstances surrounding her death remain unresolved.